Alright, so I like horror, and I like posters, so why not just mix the two together? Well, sounds simple enough until you actually have to pick a topic. I'm very picky about the kind of horror media I consume, mainly because of the inflation of the genre. Anything demonic or starring a cast with an average IQ of 2 is a no-go. My favorite kinds of horror, however, are the kinds that have a goal that goes beyond the simple survive. Literally, the only exception to this is Call of Duty Zombies, and I haven't touched that in literal years. Usually, a sign of a good horror game is if the character either has to defeat the op, escape said op, or wait for backup to do one of the first two. In other words, it needs hope. Now, I played a lot of scary games in my day. Outlast is a classic. Doki Doki, Dead Space, Callisto Protocol. I had no shortage of topics to pick from. The issue was, I don't want to make anything generic. Zombies are cool, but it's kind of a go-to, and I don't want to have to draw an alien because it's much harder than what you think. So instead, I'll just look at my game library and, So I decided to make a poster about
Resident Evil.
In this series, there are like 30 plus games and 7 movies to choose from, so I'm still stuck in the same boat. Even if I narrowed it down to the games I still have installed, there's still like 5 main characters, including protagonists and antagonists to choose from each game. Since I want to complete the project within a week, definitely not because editing's a pain and that took a month to do, I decided to go with the game that first introduced me to RE.
Capcom presents.
This game is arguably one of the greatest fighting games known to man, the first being Tekken, and I'll die on that hill. And by the way, I did recreate the home screen for Class, but like, Marvel, Capcom, if you need an artist. Anyways, I remember playing this game with my older brother and his friends on what was possibly a less than legal port and on the PS3 port before it was taken down. Now, I have the fighting collection, so goodbye pirating, allegedly. Jill Valentine was one of my 3 mains in this game. I don't remember why, but she was always my starter, followed by Spider-Man and either Akuma or Captain America. This was also where I was first introduced to Resident Evil. I like her character design and her feel as a character, and the Marvel vs. Capcom art was just doing her justice. For me, it just made sense to use Resident Evil 3 for my poster knowing where it all began. And well, Jill, she was just an obvious choice for my... Nah, I'm just playing, I went with Nemesis. Listen, hear me out. Jill was more like a beacon of hope in her game. She stepped up and did work Super Cop style, and I could see her in a cool Dune style poster thriving in a chaotic Raccoon City. That doesn't scream horror, that screams thriller or action. But Nemesis though, I only fully played the remake version of this game, but from what I read online, the OG Nemesis wasn't a problem, like Mr. X but on steroids. And I'll be honest, hearing Mr. X's footsteps in hardcore mode in the middle of the night was enough for me to consider deleting the game. With the character chosen, I set some criteria for myself. 1. I wanted that late 80s to early 90s poster feel, similar to what you see in the cover of the Hulk comics or this swamp monster thing you see in colorless films. And for reference, I did use the 2003 Hulk movie cover. 2. I needed to show Nemesis in a scene that would let the viewer know that he's that guy. For me, it was the opening scene in Resident Evil 3 where bro was casually standing in fire, like, look at that. If I had to run from that, I would have just accepted my fate. And 3, we're using his ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 design because he looks like a homeless man with firearms in the remake. I know, this game doesn't stand up to his predecessor, but it's better than Infinite. Not to mention, this style is nostalgic for me. This was another one of my childhood games. With the stage set, I could finally start drawing. And guys, this time I actually record everything. Applaud. Thank you. Thank you. I know y'all didn't actually clap. Bums. So here's the vision. I'll have Nemesis rising from the flames of a burning building with a bazooka, cause why not, with the title above him. I drew a few rough sketches, and the first one just had a special place in my heart. The second one had more potential, I'll be the first to admit, but for the vibe I was going for, I felt like the first one was the way to go. To really sell this piece, the flames needed to reflect off of everything. This was a new experience for me. Since the main sources of light were the flames that were surrounding him, that would mean the darkest shadows would be towards his center. And also how strongly the flames reflect would change depending on the material, like his jacket to his bazooka to his skin. I had to keep this all in mind as I drew him. There will be a link to a full timelines video, but this video is only going to focus on the most important aspects / challenges of this poster. The first challenge was his body proportions. I hope I didn't need to say this, but Nemesis isn't human. He's a bioweapon, which kind of adds to the horror aspect. With where science is now, what's stopping us humans from being like, screw it, T-virus? On a real note, I made his head way too big at first. Nemesis is huge, but his body still follows similar proportions to a human. I still think his head was way too big in the final product, but still much better than what it initially was. I also didn't want hours worth of footage of me just redrawing his head. That would have been boring. The second issue was the background. Now I know he's in the hallway of sorts, but with the fire and smoke, the viewer would never know that even though I made all the guidelines and everything. At first, I began to color in Nemesis before I began the background, but I forgot one major thing. Having a physical reference beat a mental image any day. So around the time I began working on the highlights of the poster, I took a break from Nemesis to work on the background. Having actual flames in the photo to work with would have made making the highlights much easier. Planning all the flames was the simple part. The hard part was getting them to look like flames without it being too cartoony or without having to spend hours upon hours trying to make them look realistic. I also needed them to glow in a sense. Nemesis' color scheme was relatively dark and desaturated, so I had to make the flames really vibrant and saturated. For the flames behind him, light work. But for the ones in front of him, that was a different story. For those, I had to make a separate layer and put the add effect on the layer to make them pop more since they were on the foreground. It worked out since the light source was the strongest in front of Nemesis, and now it looked more captivating with a glowing effect. When it came to the smoke that took up half of the poster, my original plan was to have the fire blend into the smoke, but after seeing how much space Nemesis takes up, I didn't have to worry about that. Smoke falls to the cloud territory I mentioned in the last video, so I had a field day. Now there was one major issue I had. You can probably guess it. It was those stinking highlights. I messed around with like 5 different hues of reds and orange and tried like 3 different brushes, trying to make the flames reflect off Nemesis without it being a nuisance. Which led me to another criterion. Since this was purely a personal project for fun, I refused to use separate layers when shading. I often see digital artists creating masks, separate layers, adjust hues, and use so many tools that it would be a separate video of me explaining them all. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, if anything, far from it. It's good to use those tools if you're on a time crunch or have to pump out illustrations. But for this project, I wanted to push my understanding of color to its limits to see if I can achieve my desired look with as few effects as possible. It took a bit, but after multiple 40-minute sessions, the drawing was done. I did get distracted from Lords of Fallen, which, lengthened the process. Anyways, the only thing left was the typography, which I was not satisfied with. For now, it will suffice because I finished this at like 11 o'clock at night and I just wanted to go to bed. I'll probably end up asking help from one of my professors. So I did. You see, for you guys, there was no gap, but for me, this was like a few days in the word. Anyways, whatever. So I ended up going back to change the font. I found a DeviantPage that was giving away a free font that looked similar to the Resident Evil typeface, so I did some editing off camera. I only changed the type, and it was like a 5-minute adventure, so I didn't think it was worth recording. For something I gave myself a week to do, not including editing, it turned out much better than I hoped. I thought the light emanating from the flames was going to trip me out, but I'm glad I took the challenge. Now I had to deal with the artist's dilemma, finding out what to draw next. But that sounds like a problem for future me. Here's a link, I promise. And remember, Jesus loves you, and you better hit that like or subscribe button, or else I'm going to roundhouse kick you and then backflip on your behind. Until next time.